Hello and welcome to Creative Solutions for a New World Climate and Artists series. I'm Frances Littman, the founder of Creatively United for the Planet nonprofit society and the coordinator and host of this Creative Solutions for a New World Climate and Artists series. I'd like to acknowledge we are hosting this webinar on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish people here on beautiful Vancouver Island, for whom we give this privilege, we give thanks for their privilege and their stewardship from time eternal. We have much to learn. Our final program for this summer features our Creatively United partner, Kathy Code, Vice Chair and Communications Director of the Ecoforestry Institute Society. Kathy will explore how she and a team helped save Wildwood, a rare and unique 77-acre ecoforest nestled along the shores of Quennell Lake, just north of Ladysmith, British Columbia on Vancouver Island, and use this economic model as their guide. After retiring from the BC provincial government as an economic development analyst, Kathy has continued her passion for social justice and economics in a very tangible way and will discuss strategies for operating within an ecological commitment while meeting social, cultural, and financial responsibilities. Welcome, Kathy.
Well, thank you so much, Frances. And, I've really appreciated this entire series. I've sat in on every one of them and really enjoyed the wide range of topics that we've covered. So I'm really pleased now to be able to offer this final presentation. I know at the best of times, a discussion around economics is inclined to be a little eye-rolling, inducing, and a shrug of the shoulders. But when you think about it, economics pervades all of what we do and how we live our lives. So it really is important that we understand what's happening now, what people are calling for, and what the possibilities are. So I'm really proud to present to you the story of Wildwood and how doughnut economics fits into that world. So Wildwood, life in the doughnut world. Just a little brief overview of the agenda today. Talk about a little bit about Wildwood Ecoforest and the Ecoforestry Institute Society. We'll talk a bit about doughnut economics, what that really means, and then we'll fit Wildwood into that doughnut world and talk about the ecological and social values. There are 7 values of the doughnut economics that we'll discuss, and then we'll come to some conclusions and then some ideas about what you can do. So Wildwood Ecoforest came about as a result of Merv Wilkinson, who bought the property in 1938 with the intention of farming it. Thank goodness he didn't. His UBC professor encouraged him to think about ecoforestry instead. So he studied up on the course, and in 1945 he began his ecoforestry practices on the property, practicing selective harvesting and really listening to the ecosystem and what the ecosystem needed to survive in terms of wildlife habitat, in terms of the ecosystem services that it provided. The Ecoforestry Institute Society was born out of an academic initiative from UVic in about the mid-1990s, and has always had quite a history at Wildwood of stewarding and managing the forest. And in 2016, through a Supreme Court order, we were able to actually acquire Wildwood. So we've been very fortunate that we were able to save it and keep it in the public domain. Here you can see Merv teaching ecoforestry. He was always welcoming of everybody who came to view the forest, whether it was locals or people from around the world who beat a track to his door. So and we're very fortunate that we have the legacy of those people who continue to keep coming to visit. The picture below then is the Rogues Gallery of our current board of directors, and I can tell you it's a very strong and unified and diverse board, and we're supported by a really strong core of volunteers. We're very lucky. So since November 2016, when we acquired Wildwood, we've had a number of successes. We've restored the homestead to a place where it's now accommodation for people who want to come and spend some time immersed in Wildwood. We've conducted a couple of timber harvests, and we're just now in the throes of finishing the accessible Spiffy Biffy, and you'll see pictures of that a little later. So when we talk about the economics of today, what is it that we're looking at? Right now, we've got an economy that's predicated on the right to extract natural resources regardless of human or ecological cost. The legal obligation to shareholders is to maximize economic returns with no consideration to external environmental costs. And we have a gross domestic product and a gross national product, all of which are exponentially growing year after year. This is the goods and services indexes that measure the output of an economy. So they'll measure transactions based on those goods and services, but what they don't measure though is the human value and the quality of life that we live. Robert Kennedy Jr. one time said that GDP measures everything but what life is worth living for. And a cynic once said too about GDP is that, it can be measured in terms of, of the description of the terminally ill man who crashes his car on the way to his divorce lawyer. It's all goods and services, but in terms of human happiness, it really doesn't have any value for us. So what we're seeing right now with the pandemic and the climate crisis is that people are beginning to realize that we need to do business better, that we need to live better, and that there's got to be another model by which we can live and respect the earth on which we live. As Kate Raworth, the economist who developed the Doughnut Economics, she says, today's economy is divisive and degenerative by default. Tomorrow's economy must be distributive and regenerative by design. And I think we'll show that to you in terms of this presentation. So what is Doughnut Economics? It's a system that's been recently developed and written about by Kate Raworth, who is a British economist, who was dismayed when she entered the world of economy, thinking that this was the right way to save the world, realizing that old parameters were in place like GDP that weren't realistic and didn't relate to real life values. So what she's done then is she's developed this circular notion of a donut, where the outer edge represents the ecological parameters of our world. The inner edge represents the social foundations. And then everything in between then is the connections and social values that are important to us. And so what the red areas show then are the overshoots and the shortfalls, the overshoots being climate change, loss of biodiversity, GHG emissions, freshwater withdrawals, that sort of thing. And the shortfalls then as how that relates then to the human condition, food, education, equality, social justice, those types of things. So what this does, it gives us an operational framework and a cradle to cradle model then in which we can base our decisions. So what does it mean entirely? So in a nutshell, it's, I have to apologize, this is kind of the whirlwind tour of something that's a really big subject matter. So we sort of have to whip through it a little quickly, but what it essentially means in a nutshell is a healthy environment is the primary working parameter into which social foundations of values and connections are embedded, and into which economics and the economy are embedded, which means that there is no capacity then for the endless economic expansion currently in place. So Kate Raworth lays out 7 ways to think about the donut. So she talks about changing the goal. Now, what is the goal? What is the goal besides what we have now? Our goal now is to accumulate wealth and maximize profits. So people are demanding now is to change to human rights and social equity instead of the GDP. We need to see the big picture. We need to redraw a picture with the economy embedded in the society, embedded in the ecology, and powered by the sun. She looks for new models for the models and roles for the market, the state, the household, the commons, and other players in the economic scene. It's important to nurture human nature. What is it that we want as a society? What is it that works for us? Things like education, basic needs, housing, food, water, energy. Those are the things that we need to have a life that's livable and enjoyable. She tells us to get savvy with systems, stop thinking in supply and demand, which, as many of you know, has led to the boom and bust in many of our BC communities, and instead think of feedback loops. We need to think long-term, somewhere beyond the 4-year election terms that we currently think in. We need to design to distribute. The trickle-down economics simply don't work, neither do austerity measures. We have to find a way to redistribute the wealth from the 1% down to the 99%. And so it's not just a matter of income. So we need to look at property ownership models, enterprise, technology, and the power even to create currency, our own currency. I don't know that we'll be doing Wildwood dollars anytime soon, but it's an idea nonetheless. We need to create to regenerate and refute the notion that pollution has to get worse before it can be cleaned up. You know, we have at Wildwood no tailings ponds. You know, when we do business in the forest, we have nothing. We count everything as a cost. There are no external costs. Everything is accounted for. It's a full cost accounting, which leads to a circular, not a linear economic model where humans are recognized as part of nature. And she tells us to be agnostic about growth. The GDP model requires endless growth, which we know we can't do. We have a finite planet and we have to learn to live within those parameters. So with regards to Wildwood, what we've done then is we have changed the goal, and we've been doing that then since Merv began his practices in 1945. So we have a bit of a history, although he didn't know that he was actually practicing doughnut economics. So we've been very pleased to carry on that legacy and build on it then since we acquired Wildwood. So we don't talk about the GDP model and wealth accumulation. We do embrace social justice and values. We hold Wildwood in trust for the people of BC and for the next generations. In fact, there is a title deed on the property that says that Wildwood can never ever be sold to an individual. It can only, you know, if God forbid something happens to EIS, it can only go to a like-minded charitable organization. So it will always be held in the public domain. That's the first of this type of model anywhere in Canada. And we did that with the backing of the Attorney General of BC, so we're very thankful for that. So we have now, you know, after many, many years of selective logging, we still have a forest that remains intact for all its ecological, cultural, spiritual, recreational, and health benefits. And we value the partnerships that we have with our First Nations and community partners. And we don't just cut trees to satisfy our debt. When we acquired Wildwood in 2016, we did so at the cost of an $800,000 package to which the court agreed. $450,000 of that is a mortgage. And so it was a pretty big hole for such a small nonprofit society to take on with nothing other than you know, a title deed in hand. So we've made it work, and we've made it work within the ecological parameters of Wildwood. Our business model declares first and foremost that humans are a part of nature, not apart from it, and we acknowledge the ecological services that are provided by an intact ecological system. air and water purification, climate change, resilience, carbon storage, biodiversity, wildlife habitat. These are all beyond monetary values. We cannot breathe without air. We cannot live without water. These are just essentials that we need to recognize and we need to start to respect. We have wonderful relationships within the local community with local suppliers and businesses, with our First Nations neighbors, and people have come from places like Germany and Korea to come and see, what we're doing and how that works on the ground. So it's really wonderful to be able to welcome delegations from all over the world. We do produce ecological products, timber and value-added wood products, mushrooms, wildcrafting and foraging. One of our biggest mandates then is educational programming, and our education committee is coming up with an incredible slate of educational programs that will be released soon. We've been taking this opportunity during the pandemic time to sit down and really work out how we can offer some of the most intriguing educational programming I've seen. So we'll really be excited when we get to release that for everyone's benefit. Wildwood is also available for recreational and health benefits. And we offer the homestead for accommodation and family and community events like picnics and weddings and birthday celebrations. So it's really wonderful when the community comes to Wildwood. So just think for a moment, suppose Wildwood had been clear-cut in 1945 as Merv had originally intended. Right now, the standing timber would be 75 years old and younger. We wouldn't have any of the ecological, climate change, wildlife, or social or human services available. That would have been a huge loss, I think, for us and for the community. Merv estimated that he made 2/3 of his income from the forest while owning an intact ecoforest. He was always very proud of that. In fact, he and Grace were offered many times by local logging communities to come in and clear cut the forest. And at that time, $150,000 was a huge amount of money. And he always refused. He had never had any intention of allowing wildwood to be clear cut. So we now harvested around 40 cubic meters a year. Our ecoforestry committee consists of a registered professional forester and a couple of ecoforester managers. And we've taken a very detailed inventory of wildwood so that we know exactly what's available, what we have on the land, and we know all quite well. And so when we are looking to make a harvest, we know exactly which trees will best serve the forest in terms of light, air, soil, density, species diversity. We take all of those things into consideration when we're doing a selective logging harvest. And we ensure the maximum value add for each log, and we have a portable mill, so that allows us to mill on site. In addition, we've developed a diversity of revenue streams still within our ecological parameters. And so this helps ensure our financial stability. Because we have to meet our financial costs, we have to be able to operate Wildwood, pay our mortgage, and run our educational, social, and cultural programs. We also run music and art programs, and events that fill the human spirit. So that's that sort of inner part of the donut. That's the appealing part to what makes life worth living. We also provide a range of jobs and income-producing opportunities for local citizens, artisans, and businesses. I know this is often a claim of industrial forest companies that, if we decide not to, if we decide not to do the clear-cut model anymore, then we'll have a significant loss of jobs and revenue and income. But what we've done, though, is we've developed a diverse stream of revenue and income opportunities that benefit the locals, that benefit local citizens. So Wildwood in the big picture, so we don't run a consumer-driven economy. And what we've done with Wildwood is we've restored a commons that allows people from all over the world to come and see what we've done and to enjoy the property. We've elevated social society and social values, and we've embedded the economy within ecological and social values. And as you can see by the photos, we're now powered by the sun. So we have a series of solar panels that was recently installed with the help of volunteers and a professional company, of course. But I can tell you as a board member, I've never had so many different experiences, you know, in terms of building stuff and digging trenches. So, you know, that's what I really appreciate about being with this board, is that we all pitch in and we all do what we can to progress our work. Number 3, nurture human nature. Wildwood is a place of community where we can be ourselves and where everyone is welcome and respected. Here's a class here with Jay Rastogi, one of our most favorite educational facilitators, showing people how to collect edibles in the forest. We have partnerships with First Nations, naturalists, musicians, artists, local suppliers, and we can restore our humanity through forest tours, educational programs, and events. So Wildwood and systems thinking, we operate Wildwood on a feedback loop, just like nature does. Nature's systems operate then from seed to old growth, all right on through to death. And we follow that type of operational model in what we do in our operations. Wildwood is actually self-generating. We don't have a tree planting program. We allow nature then to do the replanting herself. And I think she's done an admirable job of that. So we don't run our economy then based on supply and demand. For instance, if somebody comes to us with an order for, you know, so many board feet, what we will do instead is we will harvest what we can, what we think is appropriate from the forest, and then offer that out then to people who might be interested. And the importance of long-term thinking can't be overestimated, especially when you're talking about a forest. And we're talking about cycles of 250 years in terms of an old growth forest. So Wildwood and the distribution design. What we've done then is we've developed a new ownership model. I know Thomas Piketty, the famous French economist, has also urged people to think about various models of ownership. And so what we are basically is a nonprofit where we don't make money as the board, we make money for operational requirements for Wildwood, and with the unique protections that I mentioned to keep the property in the public domain. And the diverse revenue streams allow for distribution, not only of income in terms of jobs, but also wealth. You know, when we get donations from generous donors or government grants, this is a way then that we're dispersing that wealth then through paying tour guides, through paying caretakers, through paying, you know, people who clean the house, you know, people who, you know, from whom we buy supplies and equipment. And this is especially important in a small rural area where Wildwood is located. And it's also a place of equality where people can build social capital and share ideas. The pictures shown here then are the building of the accessible Spiffy Biffy, still in progress to be completed in July. And so what this allows us to do then is ensure that everybody can have access then to washroom facilities. when they come and visit Wildwood. So that makes us even more accessible than before. So we're very pleased with that. So Wildwood and regeneration. Wildwood, as I said before, literally self-generates. We've never had a tree planting program at Wildwood. So we've got a healthy forest, a healthy environment. We have no need to extract. I mean, it's a blessing we're a forest, I guess, and not an open pit mine where we might have tailing ponds to clean up. So we're very fortunate that way because we allow nature then to reclaim then, materials in terms of decomposition and returning nutrients to the soil that in turn feeds the new growth that comes up. So it's all very circular. And we've also used that model then in terms of our building program, where we've done what we can to ensure that the homestead is energy efficient. We've got a heat pump in there. We've got the solar panels, as I mentioned. But in terms of the homestead, when we literally gutted the place and sort of built it from the ground up, we looked around to see what we could do in terms of recycled materials, repurposed materials. I think we hit up most of the vintage shops in the area. We had a great time with that. And we had local volunteers come in and help us with things like building a chandelier from an arbutus branch, which really looks quite magnificent. So we really used some innovative thinking then to ensure that the homestead, has some creativity and some really regenerative ideas in it. Wildwood and growth. As I mentioned, GDP demands growth year after year after year. It's a compounded and exponential trajectory that has no end in sight. So if we were to apply that model to Wildwood, say at a 2% rate of growth per year, Wildwood would literally be gone in a matter of decades. So we are able to add value through other means, through education and community events. And so if Wildwood didn't exist, we would lose so much. We would lose community, we would lose knowledge, we would lose health and wellness, and just the joy of being in an intact ecosystem. And the picture there shows Nancy Turner's hand against a big leaf maple, one of the treasured trees on our property. They really are very old. I'm sure some of them are hundreds of years old. But if you talk to the industrial forest companies, this is a species that they poison to make sure that it doesn't interfere with their plantation style of forestry. So we're very glad to have these particular trees on the property. And further thoughts. EIS is just in the initial stages of planning, of owning and operating Wildwood, and we've only been in operation for 3.5 years. We've come a long way in that time. I can tell you that being a board member is pretty well a full-time job, but it's something that we're all very dedicated and very passionate about. Our foundational documents serve to guide our operations, the trust deed, our mission and values, the ecoforestry management plan that details what we do, how we do it, and what we have on the property. There's inventories of the birds, the plants, the trees, so we know what is there and then how to manage that. We offer programs and events, and in turn we welcome proposals from the community and how the property can be used. And we rely heavily on a wonderful team of volunteers with a view to eventually offering a range of well-paying jobs. And we've successfully developed the revenue streams and that meet our financial obligations. The picture here has really significant meaning for us. This is a picture of Lindsay Wilkinson and her new husband, Garrett. Lindsay is the great-granddaughter of Merv Wilkinson. And she came back to visit us in the summer of 2018, having not visited the property for quite some time. So we were really pleased to welcome her and Garrett back to the property. They stayed for a few days and then announced that they wanted to get married at Wildwood the following summer. So this is really a beautiful photo of one of their wedding photos at Wildwood. So our next chapter, a Build Wildwood program that will allow us to build a mill shed, storage shed, workshop, an ecoforestry center of excellence for educational and research opportunities, a caretaker's lodge, so some small rental cabins, and looking forward also to an art gallery and gift shop area. So in conclusion, Wildwood is a very small example of what Doughnut Economics can look like, but it's something that's scalable. The city of Amsterdam has now committed to adopting the model, and I'll be very excited to follow them and see how they work that. But the thing is that we should be remembering is that Indigenous peoples have been practicing this model for millennia, and we have so much to learn from them. And we're very pleased that we are now able to partner more with our First Nations neighbors to do just that. So in this post-COVID-19 era, we have to demand a more humane and just society, one that better respects our ecological values and boundaries. So, and you know, what can you do? How can you take part? Well, educate yourself and live with purpose. Spend your consumer dollars ethically and locally, and vote. You know who your local candidates are and what they stand for. And you can also support the work of the Ecoforestry Institute Society in terms of donations, volunteerism, and our programs. And come and visit Wildwood. You know, come and bring your kids. We're now seeing kids that are now grown up and now bringing their kids. So it's really wonderful to see that ongoing generational interest, and we welcome everyone. So thank you.
Wow, Kathy, that's fantastic. That was so rich. It was wonderful. And we have lots of questions here. So maybe we'll turn to the questions right now. Susan asks, how is the campaign going to rejoin the 6 acres to Wildwood?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been a slow go, we have to admit. We have maybe about $10,000 in the pot so far. We've been lobbying government to make a significant contribution to this. I've just emailed the Ministers of Environment and the Minister of Forests, Lands and Natural Resources again. They had directed us actually to the Nature Conservancy programs, but unfortunately, unless you allow hunting or trapping on the land, you know, then you're not eligible for a grant. And quite honestly, you know, the thought of getting a nature kid or some licen expert caught in the crosshairs or a snare is not optimal. So so we're simply not eligible for that kind of funding. So I've gone back to government again to ask them what might be available. I'm hoping there might be something perhaps under BC Restarts. I know government is looking for you know, shovel-ready projects then. So, you know, this might be an opportunity for that. But, you know, we're still seeking corporate and government contributions.
This one's from Megan. It seems to me that many more jobs would be created by doing forestry following Wildwood's model. We're never told about that because, of course, the current extraction capitalist model puts corporate profits at the top of the list. Our governments are so in the pockets of the corporations. How can we get governments to accept a different model?
Yeah, and I think, you know, at this point in time, there's such a groundswell of grassroots support. The recent letter that I've sent to Minister Donaldson pointed it out that there are so many petitions out there, so many organizations out there that are calling for, you know, the preservation of old growth and new ways to do forestry, that I have a feeling that at some point, you know, things could coalesce and we, you know, we really need to get together to speak with one collective voice. So that's one of the projects that I'm working on now is to find out a way then that we can get everybody who is advocating for this, you know, to come together and voice this collectively.
So I guess that would potentially answer the next question. How can we move back to a policy of community ownership, at least of local forests?
Yeah, and I think nonprofit models are a really good idea to start with, because that makes you eligible for grants, and which can cover certain expenses, and capital expenses, operating expenses, salary expenses, that sort of thing. So it is one way of getting local ownership then to protect these tracts of land, and a lot of old growth forest is in the hands of private landowners. So, and one of the things that we do as the Ecoforestry Institute Society is that we offer a consultation program to landowners to have a look at their forests and to suggest ways that they can preserve them.
Excellent. Wildwood is close to Guy Dauncey, who we've had on our program several times, and he's part of the Yellow Point Ecological Society as well, I believe. His ideas on ecological civilization fit well within Doughnut Economics. Are there any ways which you can share your ideas to engage your local community on a broader basis?
Well, I mean, community is what we do. In terms of programming, we've had to shut down things, due to the pandemic, but at least the public side of things. But we have been working on a number of really exciting initiatives, with our First Nations partners, with students with K-8 and hopefully K-12 students. So we are, in the process then of developing these resources and that can be available to a wide variety of people. And we encourage the community to come to us too. If they want to, if they have an idea, a proposal for a program, if they want to facilitate something, we're always open to that, because we believe that we are there for the community. We hold this on the property on behalf of the people of BC, and we want to see them take part in it.
And Hans asks, you mentioned First Nations several times. What programs or partnerships do you have with them? Mm-hmm.
When we first acquired title to Wildwood, one of the first things we did was we held a healing ceremony with our First Nations neighbors. And it was by invite only, but I can tell you it was a very spiritual, very moving experience. We hold things like pit cooks, a traditional way of First Nations cooking, with the assistance it's led by Dr. Nancy Turner and generally attended by First Nations representatives. We have an educational program now that's just in the process of being developed, that has to do with walking and stepping through the forest and stepping in the forest as a community, and learning the language, the Hokuminum language. So this is something just brand new. So it's just very exciting for us to be part of that. I think it's an excellent example of the truth and reconciliation process that can happen on the ground. So looking forward to that one.
This one's from Ted Sheldon. He's a wonderful Kathleen. I'm curious to what extent the nearby town of Ladysmith is aware of and supportive of Wildwood and all your activities. The Economics Foundation, the local jobs system thinking approach could be a substantial interest to the town. And so many people can learn so much from Wildwood, how to value its own natural resources.
That's right. And we do have, lots of really good connections in the area, especially with some of the media. Local art galleries, Take 5 in Nanaimo has been extraordinarily supportive. So yeah, and we do have a number of really great people who support the work that we do and do what they can to broadcast that and make the public more aware.
Brad asks, how do we sign up for that educational program, the First Nations program you mentioned earlier?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's still in the process of being designed. So when it's available, we'll certainly be putting out some promotions for that. And one of the things I want to mention, though, is that we do operate, as I said, within the ecological parameters of the forest, which means that we are always inherently careful about the number of people that we have on the property and how that impacts the property. So at times, registrations can be limited for that purpose. But, we do what we can then to accommodate people who are interested.
Right. Megan has got a ton of great questions here. And one of them is, how many local jobs does Wildwood support? And do you have rough figures for how much it contributes to the local economy financially?
Yeah, well, as I said, we're only 3.5 years into this process. And, in the last few months have been occupied with the pandemic. So right now there's not an awful lot of jobs, but at the same time, when we get our building program underway, when we talk about, a $1 million, $2 million project that will engage instructors, will include a commercial kitchen, include a research lab, we'll have rental cabins, so there's all sorts of jobs and that will be available then for local communities, for local citizens.
Okay, thank you. And Brenda Stewart's asking, will Wildwood be open to visits this summer?
We're not opening the tours at this point in time. We are opening the homestead for bookings because, as most of you know, only a single party can book at one time. So that's sort of how we're opening up at this point in time. Tours are a little bit more difficult because it's harder to keep the social distancing. We want to actually have our new accessible Spiffy Biffy completed before we invite the public back onto the property again.
I love that Spiffy Biffy title. Who comes up with these things, Kathy? This is great. Sandy asks, can you talk a bit more about your non-timber forest products?
Well, Again, that's a work in progress. So we've had some success then with, with things like teas. Wildwood tea is hugely popular. And Nancy Turner goes out to the forest and gathers different plants and grand fir needles for us for that particular type of tea. We do have, edible plant workshops from time to time. And one of our biggest hits has actually been shortbread with grand fir needles in it. It's really quite delicious because it adds a bit of a citrusy flavor. And we've also developed a wildwood bar in the style of the Nanaimo bar. So we've added ourselves to the Nanaimo bar trail. So things like that we've come up with.
Wonderful. Another question here. If you seek corporate contributions, aren't you in danger of being co-opted?
Well, and that's why we're very careful about who those people are. We won't accept funds from just anybody. It has to fit with our mandate and with our mission. So yeah, absolutely. We are very careful about that.
Does Kate Raworth know about your work?
No, that's a really good question. I hope she does. I hope she feels that I've done her work justice. So yeah, I hope she hears about it. And yeah, it would be lovely to have her come to Wildwood at some point in time.
Perhaps we could share, you could share, or we could all share this video, fill her inbox with it. That might be a great idea. We just send it to her. She hears.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Brad Ferguson just has a ton of great things to say and add. I think this will be our last because we're just about at the end here. But he talks about our current economic system being a hybrid system of profit-based economic units, not for profit-based economic units, and volunteer economic units. And changing the reporting and control systems to one model, so that we're comparing apples to apples rather than to apples to pipe dreams of infinite growth, which profit-based accounting perpetuates. So his question is, what system does Wildwood use to prepare its reports?
Oh, well, I mean, we still use a standard, assets and liability type of reporting, financial reporting statements. We still use the regular accounting type of things. It's just how things fall under that. So, we do have debt, and, we're keenly aware of that. So it's an unusual position for a small nonprofit to be in that position right up front, but it was the only way we could save Wildwood. So we're glad to do that.
That's great. And I think at this point, Kathy, that we're going to carry on here. I just want to thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been
it was wonderful. This Climate and Artists Weekly webinar series is presented by the Creatively United for the Planet Nonprofit Society in partnership with the Ecoforest Institute Society, of which Kathy's part of, and John O'Riordan of the Gail O'Riordan Climate and the Arts Legacy series. John, we'd love for you to provide us with a summary of today's program and a quick overview of what we've covered since launching this Climate and Arts series 10 weeks ago.
Well, thank you, Frances. And thank you, Kathy, for a wonderful presentation. That was certainly inspiring. So over the last 2 months, and I can't believe it's only 2 months, Creatively United has undertaken 14 webinars, 6 during the Earth Week Festival and 8 during the current Climate and the Arts series. The overall theme of these webinars is to replace fear with hope. The climate crisis is a disease, and it's manifested by living outside nature's healthy limits. As is the case with the human body, disease cannot be cured by fear. It can only be cured by hope. So we will become well again, but we will become better than we were before the disease was created, because we were going to live within nature's limits, and we're going to be more spiritually aware of our role in society and in the universe. But let's not fool ourselves. We have entered a planetary crisis that has the potential to threaten our current civilization and significantly disturb our ecosystems. So we need collective action supported by individual action and bold leadership to lead us on this journey of hope. This series has deliberately blended science with art to create synergies that combine hope with action. Science is not magic. It is ruled by the laws of thermodynamics, and it needs scientific methods to proceed. Our water scientists clearly demonstrated the importance of evidence-based understanding so that we can adapt to the ever-changing hydrology created by climate change. Our forest science earlier this month, and with Kathy today, have also demonstrated that only by following the laws of nature can we truly have sustainable forests. Humanity needs every bit of strength and vision it can muster to find the right path to hope, a path that leads us to both an ecologically based civilization as espoused by Guy Dauncey, and to the application of Doughnut Economics as set out by Kathy today. Art has a vital and essential role to play in this transformation. It provides us with inspiration, creativity, and envisioning a better future. So in that context, we plan to take a summer break for the months of July and August, and starting in September, we'll reconstitute our Climate and Artists series with a dozen or more videos in the same time slot to continue this journey of hope. The webinar series will continue to meld science with art. We'll explore new science with international experts. We'll also blend in morality, spirituality, and the creativity of the arts. All in all, we want to flatten the carbon curve, just as we did the COVID curve, by collective action and by aligning our self-interests to support humanity as a whole. Over the summer, we'll be researching how individuals can lower their individual carbon footprints. We will measure what individual actions contribute so that collectively we can start the global treatment process. As we heal ourselves, collectively, we will heal the planet. Thank you, Frances.
Well, always well spoken, John. Applause. I really strongly encourage everyone to just check out Creatively United now and again, and we'll send occasional newsletters as well. We also have the letters that we crafted that I'd like to remind people, since we're taking a break for the summer, if you haven't sent in your letter to the decision makers where we provided email addresses and made it super convenient for people to cut and paste. We strongly encourage you to go back to Creatively United over the summer, and there's no time like the present, but anytime you can, to send your letters. So we have one for a new eco-forest management system, an ecological approach to ecosystem management, and enhanced water security cooperation in Canada. And these were crafted with the experts who have been on our program. These are leading scientists, leading decision makers themselves. So it would be really great if everybody could take the time to do that and share those letters, because they actually do make a difference, and we will be following up with those decision makers. Before we go on the note of what Kathleen shared today, there was a fabulous film that was premiered this last weekend, and it's called 2040. I know John saw this film, and we both saw it, and we were very encouraged by it. And it's a feel-good film that I think everyone needs to see. John, tell us more.
Well, it's about a man who was concerned about the future of his daughter. His daughter, at the time of the film, when it was shot in 2019, was about 3 or 4. So he was concerned, what kind of world would she inherit when she was 20 years older, so the earlier to mid-20s. So he postulated, what can we do between now and 2040 to put ourselves on the right path to sustainability? And he actually researched some of the most advanced, but also practical, actually working technologies in energy and transportation, agriculture and aquaculture, in a way to change the curve, reduce our carbon footprint, and make us more sustainable and live with nature. Very, very interesting examples, but probably the most interesting example was the importance of providing equal rights to females so that they were contributed to society, had a family that was commensurate with their well-being, and were a part of the problem. He felt that that was a really viable solution to creating a more sustainable future. Wonderful film, well worth seeing.
Oh, there's so much more than that too. It looks at, he looked at systems that are currently in place. Like, he wasn't looking to the future. He really looked at so many wonderful things that are already happening in the world, and energy systems, independent solar grids, the permaculture and regenerative farming. Those are videos, by the way, which we also have on Creatively United. We are a solutions hub, community-based, free of charge. You can post your own blog. You can create your own blog. Tell us what movies you've seen. Tell us what resources you've found. And let's just keep building this community in support of each other. We have more than 176 nonprofits and organizations listed on our Pair Up directory that are doing amazing things. So people don't have to feel like they're reinventing the wheel. They can just come, check out the resources, see what's happening. And there's so much to share, including our solutions guide. So I want to thank you all. We've been trying to keep to time, and we're actually even a few minutes early, which I'm sure nobody minds, but I want to thank you, John. I want to thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Jake. And thank you to our audience. I'm just so grateful to all of you for tuning in and sharing these programs. So have a wonderful summer, everyone.